So, if you could just start by introducing yourself.
I'm Ann Shedd. I'm a physician by training, and for the last 3 years have been serving on the City of Keene Cities for Climate Protection Committee, which was established in the year 2000, and part of its work led to the city's adoption of a climate action plan in 2004, a climate adaptation plan in 2007, incorporation of climate change into the city's comprehensive master plan in 2010. There's quite an extensive list of tasks that are under the purview of the committee, more than any volunteer committee that meets once a month could possibly do. But there has been progress. Part of the campaign that the city signed on to in 2000 was to adopt some greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. And the city defined 1995 to 2015 as the window to look at. Just last week, the report on the 2015 data was finalized and presented to City Council. And the municipal sector, the goal had been to decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 20% over that 20 years. It's been at least 25%, depending on how you handle the methane emissions at the transfer station, which have been captured and used to power the transfer station since 1999. If we include those, the city has done even better at decreasing its emissions.
Oh, wow.
The other side has been community-wide emissions reduction. The goal there was 10%, and it's not reached that goal.
Okay.
So there's still a lot of work to do, but energy systems are definitely part of the challenge of bringing down greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where my interest in this interview process comes from.
So, my first question is a little broad. What does Keene with 100% renewable energies look like to you? And this could be, what does it look like day to day from an individual perspective or from a community at large? It's really whatever you envision.
There are several arenas that will need to change to get there. A big one is transportation. Again, this report that was just finalized, almost 50% of Keene's calculated community-wide greenhouse gas emissions are from the transportation sector. The other 50% roughly split between residential and commercial industrial. The municipal sector is a rather small piece of the pie, probably less than 2%. So transportation will need to evolve. Certainly the automobile industry is looking toward increased manufacture of electric vehicles. That will require the infrastructure to charge the electric vehicles when people are traveling. So Keene will have more electric vehicle charging stations. My vision is that there will be photovoltaic parking shelters on all of our parking lots, and that will be a very immediate way to generate the electricity to charge the electric vehicles. Our city school bus fleet, Keene's small public transportation fleet, the taxis that run around town, all can make that transition. Not easily, but it's coming. The private vehicles are going to be a challenge because our society is very much geared toward jump in our cars, go where we want to go, when we want to go. But as electric vehicles become more available and more affordable, I think they will be an increasing part of the transportation fleet. Use of public transportation. Can Keene expand its bus service, not only within the city, but intercity? And there are organizations that are working toward that. Early steps, but looking at what could be done. Commercial and industrial, probably the transition has good economic justifications for changing. There are several businesses in town that have already adopted some energy efficiency measures in terms of everything from lighting, heating, cooling, and ventilation, motor drives on manufacturing equipment. There's a lot that can be done there that ends up saving the companies money pretty quickly, in the scale of decreasing our demand for energy. At least a couple of businesses in town have installed photovoltaic. There's a manufacturing company called Filtrene over behind the Best Western.
Yeah.
Target, I understand, has at least some photovoltaic.
You want to do that?
Yeah. So I haven't been able to find out how many kilowatts their system is, but it's something. And certainly there's a lot of rooftop on commercial and industrial buildings that could be used.
Absolutely.
Part of that transition, I think, will be something I'm just learning about called microgrids. So that,
Yeah.
For instance, the medical center, if it were generating energy on site and there were a system-wide power failure, there's something called islandable microgrids. Normally with photovoltaic or other renewables, if the grid goes down, the system has to be disconnected so that when line workers are working to restore power, they don't
Right.
get zapped.
Yeah.
So if there were a way to isolate a microgrid, then it could continue to generate energy. I think Puerto Rico was a great example of
Yeah.
what would have been the merits of that. When you look at the heartbreaking pictures of
Right.
hospitals trying to function with no power. And I think Tesla went down and set up kind of a big pole-mounted system in one of the parking lots of one of the
did that.
hospitals there rather quickly and got them up and running. I haven't seen too much follow-up on how the solar that Puerto Rico already had fared in the hurricane, because those were pretty intense winds. But that
Yeah.
kind of extreme weather event will need to be factored into the renewable energy systems.
So, how do you think it would be a better place to live or work?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think greater energy independence will keep money in the area rather than the figure I've heard is New Hampshire spends $6 billion a year on energy and most of that goes out of state. So keeping it local is to the economic benefit of the community, therefore to the economic benefit of all of its citizens. Air quality is something of a concern in Keene, sitting on a valley floor. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a sustainability conference in Utah, north of Salt Lake, and air quality is basically the same topography on a larger scale there. Salt Lake Valley is a big flat valley with
Yeah.
12,000-foot mountains all around it. There are 2 interstates that run through there. There are 3 oil refineries in the Salt Lake Valley, at least. There's a lot of the home heating and cooling and commercial, and their air quality is appalling. They've been under EPA sanction for a number of years now that they have to do something about it. But still, after everything they've done, on an inversion day in the winter, there's this yellow-gray layer that sits over the city
Oh, wow.
or over the valley. Keene has had a few days here and there that have violated the EPA standards, but not to the point of invoking sanctions yet. Older, inefficient wood stoves are one factor in that. Dr. Travis at Keene State has done a fair amount of work on that with some of her students. But tailpipe emissions are a significant contribution in any community to
Yeah.
the EPA criteria pollutants, to the things that directly impact human health, as opposed to the greenhouse gas emissions, which just breathing them may not harm us, but the long-term impacts certainly do.
Of course.
So yes, it will be better.
And lastly, what kinds of steps would you like to see taken in the short term?
I think writing a renewable energy plan for the city is a great start. Assessing what Keene's energy usage is at this point, what Keene's potential to provide those needs with local renewables, and not just local. I mean, offshore wind potential of New Hampshire is significant. That's going to be a big infrastructure investment, but compared to building other new plants,
Right.
um, it's a consistent, reliable, it's called base load energy, as opposed to solar, which is great, but it takes sun for it to work. Storage, of course, is going to be a big part of that. So what are we using? How can we generate it locally? How can we have it be consistent, reliable, and affordable? The consistency may come from battery storage, which is improving by leaps and bounds and becoming more affordable by leaps and bounds. It may come by this kind of base load generation of things like offshore wind.
Mm-hmm.
Nuclear is probably not going to go right away.
Right.
So during the transition, it certainly can provide some of that base load generation. And then looking at what are the financing options for actually installing some of those renewables for residential and even for municipal scale solar. There are various funding models available, so a plan that looks at what's available in New Hampshire would be a step toward getting us to increasing percentages of renewable. Right? It's not going to be instant.
No, certainly
It's going to take some behavior modification. Probably not huge if electric vehicles become part of our scene, but if anything, it may be liberating because people won't be paying for oil deliveries, and there won't be diesel-powered oil delivery trucks running around. I think there will be some merits to that transition.
Mm-hmm. And there's also social aspects of coming to terms with the change.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that about covers my questions. Thank you for meeting with me.
Right. Well, thank you for taking the class and for all the class is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be an interesting project to read the final reports and maybe even share with city government at some point.
Yeah, hopefully.